David Koresh lived in the 19th century. So in 1987, at Camp Palestine, so this is where the movement was headquartered from 1985 to 1988, kind of like the exile years. The fire occurred at New Mount Carmel Center, which was the headquarters of the Branch Davidian movement from 1965, having been previously owned by the Davidians. And so in 1993, on this 30th anniversary period of time, February 28th being the 30th anniversary of the ATF raid, April 19th being the 30th anniversary of the fire and the tragedy of the destruction of the building and the death of many of the Branch Davidians. Taking this opportunity to talk about things concerning David Koresh and the Branch Davidians. So, in 1987, in Palestine, Texas, there was a study that had just wrapped up being given to the members of the group in the main building. And at the time, all the main people who were members of the group at the time, including myself, my family being my mom, dad, my wife, a lot of the people who had come in from Hawaii just recently, so also Australia, were there. And after the study was, right when the study was ending and David Koresh was winding down at the time, Vernon Howell, we weren't calling him David Koresh in 1987. Vernon Howell, I don't remember what triggered the comment, but Vernon Howell stated his belief that in 1987 that he stated that we were in the 19th century. And this immediately triggered a reaction from the adults in the room. Various exclamations of surprise, denial, disbelief, etc. Judy Schneider, I remember in particular, was like, "No," and I was just watching it's like watching a train wreck, or you can't take your eyes away as people a futile effort to try to convince Vernon that we're actually in the 20th century in 1987, not in the 19th. No, it didn't work. I recently had a conversation with an ex-member who escaped the group in the 92. She told me today that she actually attempted to, kind of take pencil and paper and draw a chart and show Vernon, or I guess by this time David Koresh, what century we're living in 1987 or whatever, whenever she was trying, 88, 89. Again, no. He could have played the Tom Petty song, right? Won't back down. He's not going to back down, right? He's digging in his heels. Stand my ground, right? He's not going to be moved from this belief that we live in the 19th century. In 87, I was there. I saw this. So what's going on? Now, I can't explain to you precisely why he believed such a thing, other than I can only relate my own experience. My own experience was, I remember that I thought we lived in the 19th century when I was 12. And so I remember arguing with a couple of my friends who apparently were a little more advanced than me in terms of counting centuries, and they told me no, but I think you know, at some point I figured it out, right? And we all do, I guess. But at the age of 28 years old, Vernon Howell doesn't know what century we live in, or at least he's mistaken. Um, and I was talking to this woman today when she was talking about, you know, her exasperation at trying to explain to him in very concrete terms. You know, it's like trying to explain why water's wet, right? Or why you know the sky is blue or grass is green. You're trying to explain to someone who's very stubborn a basic fact of that's like self-evident, and yet not getting through. Now, it doesn't have anything to do with intelligence, because David Koresh was a perfectly intelligent person. He wasn't like, I don't think he was any kind of genius or anything, but on the other hand, he was fine. I would say he was of average, normal human intelligence. So it doesn't have anything to do with that. He believed that he was a prophet, and he believed that obviously that means he believed he was inspired of God, but more than that, he believed that he was infallible. And this matched his personality because it was very psychologically difficult from my perspective, from a few times when I saw him like interacting with Rachel, his wife. And you know, when you're married, right, there's probably going to be some marital difficulties. There's going to be arguments about things. It's normal. Give and take in a married couple's disagreements about various issues that come up. You know, I've admitted that I have been wrong in the past. My wife has been wrong. It's no big deal. That's the way it goes. I saw David Koresh one time admit that he was wrong about something to his wife Rachel, and this would have been early days, like 1984. You would have thought he was giving blood. Like, I remember him saying it's so hard. You know, literally like something like just shaking. Like, woo, man. Dude, it's just, you know, you're wrong, you move on. It's not a big deal. For David Koresh, I believe psychologically, admitting that he was wrong was psychologically painful. And one of his relatives told me that they had a similar trait, that admitting that they were wrong was a difficult thing to do psychologically. It seemed like they mentioned the same thing, that it was emotionally painful. So, yeah, that trait in combination with this doctrine of infallibility, because he had a verse in the Bible. There's a verse about Cyrus, the ancient king, which is Koresh, right? That's where the Koresh comes from in David Koresh. So Cyrus, the ancient king in Isaiah, God says, you know, I will direct all your ways. And, you know, in my opinion, it's talking about, you know, as Cyrus marches on to victory, he defeats the Babylonians, right? He's a real historical figure. The Persians were achieved victory against the Babylonians in the 6th century BC, and this is a prophecy indicating God is saying, so to speak, that he's going to prepare the way for Cyrus and make sure that he's victorious, and that's all it means. But David Koresh takes this super hyper literally. So I will direct all your ways, meaning no matter what he does or what activity he's engaged in terms of living his life and giving the message in the 80s and 90s, that God is directing his ways. He's, I guess, kind of like a sort of like papal infallibility, I guess, except it's even more because papal infallibility technically is only when the Pope is speaking ex cathedra, which means from the bench. So if the Pope is in a position where he is as the representative of Christ on earth, issuing a formal doctrine and speaking ex cathedra, then yes, there's this papal infallibility that kicks in. But if the Pope is, sitting down for an evening meal, maybe with some of his friends, and they're just kind of discussing opinions about a particular movie that they had watched recently or something, I doubt Pope Francis insists on infallibility in those situations. But Vernon told me one time on the phone, David, at this point he's David Koresh, when he called me one time in 1990. This was the third phone call I got before he died. He told me, because we were arguing about this type of thing, and he told me on the phone, I'll never forget, he said, "I have never been wrong." Wow. Wow, that's a heavy burden to bear for someone to say that they've never been wrong. I would never want to be in a position like that. So, yeah, David Koresh believed that in 1987, and of course all the 1900s, right? I guess 1900 to 1999, he would have believed, if he'd have lived to 1999, he would have believed that he was in the 19th century. I think one of the things going on is once you establish that you believe such a thing, then you don't want to change, because that indicates weakness. Probably something that's going on there. Very strange. It's like an existential crisis almost every time you're confronted with being wrong. It's just like you're hanging on for dear life, like, oh my God, nah. He doesn't want to be wrong about anything, because it's like violates his own sense of himself. Now you would think, what was the reaction of people at the time? Like, well, it's like a curiosity, Oh, we have this guy. I mean, we didn't say this, but this is effectively what we believe. Well, this guy has the secrets of the universe. He's the prophet for the last days, and he's going to lead us into the kingdom and heaven, and he's got the answers to everything, except for he doesn't understand what century we're in. But other than that, he's fine, Like, it's really weird. It's really weird. This was widely known in the group. But there wasn't some kind of mass exodus or anything. You're just kind of, oh, well, Vernon's got this weird thing about what century we're living in. Other than that, he's great, But actually, I thought about it recently, like, well, I could have been justified in just based on that one thing alone. I could have walked right out the door. Like, look, I don't care how inspired someone is, right? If they don't know what century we're in, then they have they have a broken connection with the truth. Right? This is a person who's talking about the truth all the time. They're talking about people lacking wisdom and knowledge, and people being Babylonians because they're confused. But if such a person can't even figure out what century we're in, which is something that is self-evident, right? It's common sense. If they can't figure it out, then they're epistemologically broken, right? Fancy way of saying that their thinking processes are basically screwed, right? Their thinking processes are broken and corrupted. So I don't care how many hours of Bible study you have and all of these wonderful things you're learning, blah, 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 which is all things they said. You don't know what century you're in. If God's inspiring you and you're a prophet, and God is the creator of the universe is reaching down into your brain and putting information in your brain. And God is supposed to be, all light and truth and wisdom and knowledge and everything, and yet can't figure out how to let you know what century we're in. Like, hey, Vernon, cut the 19th century crap, okay? Get real. He never got around to that. In one of my previous stories, literally, Vernon's God, with all the stuff going around in the universe, and but tells him to let me get married. That's a previous presentation I gave. Okay, but never tells him what century we're in. I mean, that's very strange. So I just thought I'd make a short little video on that. It's peculiar and weird, and it was one of the things that he was about. And we'll talk some more about his strange beliefs and his epistemology in a future video, where I'll go into some of the things, other weird things that he believed. Till next time.